Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. It's Tuesday, and that means the pads are going on. The Steelers are back at it at Steelers training camp. We've got Matt Williamson on the show to talk about that. We'll get into that and a lot more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus every single day. That's right. There's something for everyone, new customers, returning customers, all day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Matt Williamson. If you know the Locked On Podcast Network, you know Matt Williamson. You also know him from Steeler Nation Radio, DK Pittsburgh Sports, everywhere that Matt is. Matt, welcome back to the show, man. How you doing?
I am great, man. How are you? I'm excited to run into you at camp. I saw you on the sidelines, but I was watching from the press box. We have not bumped into each other at Sharky's quite yet, but I'm moving back in. Probably when people are listening to this, I'll be there 6 days straight, pretty much 6 days a week. So it's good stuff, man. And pads are going on. Let's go.
Absolutely. There's a lot of excitement there. Also, for those who don't know, Matt's a big wig. Like he gets to sit up in the AC. He gets to sip on some water. I'm down there sweating on the field. But, you know, he's earned those rights and such. I will get to Sharkies at some point. I haven't been able to because of other things I've had to handle. But
I'm also living in the dorms, which is, I guess, considered a big wig because I'm not paying any money. But
it don't feel like it.
Sleeping in my bed at home last night felt pretty good.
No, I feel you entirely. Those beds do not look comfortable as much as it is nice to not. But I wanted to get your thoughts on what you've seen with the offensive line so far, Matt, because whereas no pads have been on, you know, I talked to Roy how we briefly got to see Troy Fautanu work against the ones on Sunday that was, and you know, he looked solid in a rep against TJ Watt. You saw Broderick Jones, he's been here and there. He dealt with a minor injury, but we haven't had a chance really to get too much of a look at Zach Frazier so far. But everyone's wondering how soon the future of the offensive line that they've invested in the last two drafts will become the starting offensive line. Mm-hmm. What's your vision for how this training camp will play out as far as where Troy Fautanu will fit, what tackle spot Broderick Jones will fit, and how those three kind of mingle with each other? Yeah,
there's a lot to unpack here. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, they haven't been able to do true O-line stuff yet. You know, I mean, when we're recording this, the acclimation period is in the books. So we saw 4 practices, but we have not seen true football blocking, trying to block Cam Hayward and TJ Watt, you know, play after play after play. That being said, I have really focused on the O-line in individual stuff, you know, because I know I couldn't see them do football stuff, and we have all these young guys, and I'm really excited about the group as a whole and the way they move. The first round pick in particular has rare movement skills, as we saw at the University of Washington as a draft prospect. His quickness, a lot of the outside zone stuff that they're practicing in unison, they all look really good doing. And of course, that's not real football. I mean, that's not blocking Nick Bosa, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. I think the offensive line is very deep. I think that's becoming an Omar Khan trait, that he's going to bring one extra NFL lineman to camp. And by that, I mean someone that's going to play in the league. Then the team will probably keep. You know, we saw them trade Green and Dotson last year. I think Moore or Herbig could be that guy if everything works out with the young pups that you get a pick for down the road.
Right.
Frazier's the hardest one for me to evaluate so far, just because he's a center and he's not running with the ones, but it's neither good or bad. I do think when it's all said and done, and maybe even a week from now, we'll start to see serious reps with Frazier at center, Fautanu at right tackle, and Jones bumping back to the left. And I'm sure people are saying, why not just do it now? Pouncey's like the only guy that I can remember even being anointed a starting position. You know, I think it's disrespectful to the whole locker room, to Herbig, to Moore, who aren't Dermontti Dawson and Anthony Munoz, obviously, but they're quality NFL players that are going to be in this league for a while, that you have to earn it here. And I do think that is not a misnomer, but I would be shocked if the line that we expected on draft day with Jones on the left, Fautanu on the right, doesn't come to fruition once we really start hitting down the road here too, like before long.
No, I agree with you. In fact, to your point about, deference and rookies learning in the process, Broderick Jones actually spoke about that. I'm glad you brought that up. It's a great segue into this because here's the clip. This was Broderick Jones, one of the earlier days of camp when we got to talk to him. Our first two questions are about right and left and where he's going to play. And he's kind of like, hey, I'm going to fit anywhere. But when he gets asked about, was it good for him to wait last year? He acknowledges like, yeah, it helped me. And so that kind of gives some insight as far as a guy who just went through what Fautanu and Frazier are. But here's Broderick Jones himself. Here was him at Steelers camp.
Speaking of moving around, do you expect to be moving around that line, or you think you're just going to be?
Honestly, I really still don't know. I'm just coming out here every day trying to get 1% better, even if it's at left or right. I'm just trying to, do my part, when my name is called on either side. I just want to be prepared.
When you look back at last season, do you think you began starting at the right time, or do you think you could have handled it game one?
I feel like I started at the right time. I feel like I needed a couple weeks, to actually just sit and watch and just learn and listen and take everything in before I was just able to go out there and, just do what I can. So I feel like me being able to sit down those first couple weeks really helped me. I really feel like it helped me hone in on my skills. And, at the end of the day, I feel like it worked out for the best.
You end up playing both sides. If it came to switching mid-season this year, could you do it?
Yes, sir. Without a doubt. I feel like I'm a versatile player. I can play on either side. I've been doing it my whole life. I practice at it each and every day just so I'm always getting reps on both sides because, like you said, I never know. Coaches really probably still don't know. So, we just got to let time tell and just continue to just get 1% better.
So there was Broderick Jones explaining that. And man, he talked about, that process and what he got to learn from that. I wanted to get your impression, Matt, from what you saw from last year of Broderick Jones to just early evaluations of how he seems to be in the football without pads part. Does he look like he can be a guy that plays at left tackle? Or do you think there's a lot of people that think that he's a much better run blocker than a pass blocker, and maybe right tackle should be where he's at?
Couple notes here and some things that he said too, that let's not forget that the Steelers opened with Nick Bosa, Crosby, Garrett, and I forget who else, it couldn't have been more of a murderer's row for a first round offensive tackle. I'm sure that factored into the equation as well whenever we opened the 2023 season. I believe that they believe and he believes that he is equal on the right side or the left. And kind of like Amarius Mims at Georgia, he wasn't a 4-year starter on one side where he only developed one set of skills. I mean, he is versatile. He's extremely talented. And I do agree with the masses that his rookie tape is he's a much better run blocker than pass protector. But you can take that two ways. He's a force in the run game. I mean, he's a killer on the move. He can uproot defensive tackles, defensive ends. He can get to the second level. And I think protection is just lacking. I mean, it's just inexperience. His technique needs a lot of work. I think it absolutely can come. And one thing I can tell, all our listeners here is Isaac Seumalo is the leader of that offensive line room. And he's very smart. He's a veteran. He's a really good player. But Broderick Jones is quickly becoming, this is getting ahead of my skis, but he's getting that pouncy feel where he's becoming a dog in the locker room too. Like he's a future leader. He's a tough guy. He's holding people accountable already in year 2. So they're raving about that kind of stuff about him too.
No, and that's the other thing about it, I think is very much the locker room part of things. The Steelers need leaders. They need guys that are locker room guys. I think that's the biggest thing. And I've said this a lot too. The biggest thing when I got to talk to Ryan Shazier on the North Shore Drive podcast, and one thing that Ryan talked about was how the defense always had leaders. You'll go back way before him to Casey Hampton, to James Ferrier, to Troy Polamalu, to James Harrison, to Lawrence Timmons, to Ryan Shazier, to Cam Hayward, to TJ Watt. It has been a succession of guys, and the offense had that for a bit, but there was a clean cut with Roethlisberger, Pouncey, DeCastro, all gone. And then it was like Kenny Pickett, Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth, George Pickens, Deontay Johnson. Like, there was not a passing of the torch there. And I think that's where a guy like Broderick Jones, if they can develop him, and, a guy like Russell Wilson helps with kind of like carrying the torch for just a little bit, then they can develop that class of younger players who redevelop the leadership structure and culture on the offensive side.
It's massive. And I'm older than you. So frankly, the defense has had a successor at leadership since Joe Green. They really have.
They really
even
have.
During the lean years of the 80s, they always had a dude that carried a big stick, starting with Joe Green and now all the way to Cam Hayward and Minka and et cetera, et cetera. We know the lineage. And the offense has really been lacking in that department. It can't be Mason Cole and Allen Robinson. You know what I mean? Like, those guys are professionals and they're good with the media and they were respected, but they're not good players. You know what I mean? It needs to be, with all respect to Ben, it was Pouncey, it was DeCastro, it was Villanueva, it was Ramon. You know what I mean? Like, if you could get that O-line back to being, frankly, a bunch of badasses, it carries a long way. They're the biggest dudes in the room. That stuff matters too,
It does, absolutely. And also, to your point about his impact in the run game, and I say this all the time, the Steelers went from one of the worst rushing teams in football last year to one of the better rushing teams in football in the second half of the season. I think they actually had the second most yards per game in the second half of the season once Broderick Jones became a starter. So a lot there. I want to get more of your thoughts, Matt, especially on the defensive line, because there's young guys there that also need to show up when the pads go on. We'll talk about them in a minute here. Next on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stick with us. We still got a lot to discuss. But first, I want to remind you, this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. I love sports, and there's plenty of action going on right now. And that you can get in on all that action when you download FanDuel as an app on your phone or go to their website, FanDuel.com, to stay locked in on all that action, whether it's Major League Baseball, WNBA, big fights, or the Olympics. All I have to do is open up my phone, my app on my phone, and I can immediately see all the different bets that you can make right now. And right now, this summer, all summer long, FanDuel is hooking up all customers. That's right. It's not just new customers. It's not just returning customers. It's everybody. If you go to FanDuel.com, you can get a boost or a bonus on a bet every single day. That's right. Something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com today and start making the most out of your summer. And that's FanDuel, an official sportsbook betting partner of Major League Baseball. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Matt Williamson of Steeler Nation Radio and the many affiliates that this man has, because he carries a lot of ways. He's also here in the Locked On Podcast Network. But Matt, I think there's a lot of excitement for Keeanu Benton this year, and reasonably so. I thought he had a good year last year. I want to hear your thoughts on this evaluation of him, and this is more of a self-evaluation. When I talked to Keeanu Benton, he talked about, hey, like, I felt like I started well but didn't finish well enough last year. And then when I brought that up to Carl Dunbar, he said, yeah, he should have had about 7 more sacks if he had learned how to finish better last year. What do you think it will take for Keeanu Benton to get there? I asked him about what he did during the offseason. He said a big part of it was he trained himself to have more endurance so that he wouldn't lose like his motor as the game goes on. Is that the biggest thing you think that might be in the way for him?
That was one of the negative columns coming out of college. I mean, late in games, later in the season, when he played a lot of snaps, the pad level went up a little bit. That's not uncommon. And especially year one, when you have to play 17 games against grown men that are getting paid $5 to $10 million a year to block you. So not surprising whatsoever. And I do think that's why he didn't become a full-time player. Not that any D lineman is going to be 100% snap guy anyway. That being said, I truly think he will be a star. I mean, I'm not sure if he'll reach Cam Hayward levels, but we might talk about him as a Tuitt Cam type of force in the middle of that line for a long time. I very much believe that. Now, I just heard this the other day that I think my numbers are right, but if not, I'm only like 2 or 3 off. He only played 79 snaps on third downs all last year.
Oh, wow.
And he only rushed the passer on third downs like 50 times. Well, that's where the sacks come. You know what I mean? If you talk about putting up numbers, filling out the stat sheet. And I think right now, if they were to play a game their front four on 3rd and 8 would be the 2 edge guys, Hayward and Ogunjobi. But I think Benton will replace Ogunjobi in that probably from week 1 this year. I'll be shocked if he doesn't. And big picture with the line, I think Ogunjobi's also a good player, but he's another one that I think less of him is more. That I don't think that I think the more snaps he plays, the less effective he becomes.
I do wonder how that plays out this year, because Ogunjobi's the vet, Cam Hayward's the vet, but Keanu Benton is the future.
Yeah,
and I mean, like, I was talking about this with Nick Farabaugh earlier this offseason. There were redrafts being done by like national people, and Keanu Benton everywhere was a first-round pick. Some places even like a top 10 pick. People were like, this guy could be the real deal. I look at him and I absolutely see that, but I think there's a lot of people. This is kind of a hot take for me because a lot of people don't agree with this. I think DeMarvin Leal still has the potential to not get to where Benton is, but to be an effective defensive lineman on the Steelers defensive front, and sooner rather than later. Like, I'm not saying just 5 years down the road. I'm saying like this year, I think he can be part of the rotation. And then maybe by next year or the year after, he's starting right next to Benton. And the two of them could be a dynamic, different style of 1-2 punch in the middle of the defensive line. What's your evaluation of DeMarvin, what he needs to show this year?
This isn't to sound negative, but I think you're more optimistic about him than I am. That being said, we were talking before we hit record that we both think his quickness has improved from a year ago, which is great. Hopefully it does in week 12 and the rigors of the game and all that stuff, don't beat you up too much. But as a broader topic, I always talk about every year at camp for every team, but we always focus on the Steelers, of course. There's 5 or 6 drafted players that are in year 2, year 3, that are what I call a career crossroads. I think Calvin Austin's in a career crossroads. Like, if you don't put up now, you're gone, and we'll find someone just like you. Loudermilk's absolutely at a career crossroads. And I think it's that point with Leal, too, where you need to be in the top 4, the top 5, not a borderline healthy scratch against teams that are going to run the ball a lot. This is a pivotal year, pivotal preseason. Like, if he get 2 sacks in the preseason or constant pressures, like, okay, he's one of the guys I think is, again, at a career crossroads. And by that, I don't mean he's going to go down or up, but he better do 1 or 2 because you need to know about him or you need to trust him, pivotal year.
I agree about that. And like that's the thing is you got guys that hit those points in their careers where they time to show. And he's at that point. He has 1 more year on his rookie deal after this season. And, you don't want to go into the final year of your rookie deal not sure if you're even part of the defensive plan. If
you know that by now.
Exactly. And here's the thing is that he could even be decent this year, but if he's not decent enough, maybe they just don't invest in him because they're like, you know what, we'll draft another young defensive lineman who'll be on this roster on a rookie deal, and they'll be the partner with Keanu Benton, who we will pay in a couple years. And I think that could be that's the mentality where he has to strike now to be part of the rotation, so that next year he isn't. It's not question if he's one of the guys. He's one of the guys.
Yeah, 100%. And I know we're way getting ahead of ourselves, but it shouldn't surprise anyone if their first-round pick next year is a 300-pounder on defense. And it looks like it's a really good class, side note, and that's subject to change. We're not going to talk about draft here, but don't be shocked if with the 20th pick in the draft, they go D-tackle,
Now, let's talk about depth here real quick on the D-line. The Steelers have had a lot of guys that they've kind of brought in. They still kept around Montrevious Adams, Lowry, Logan Lee, Isaiah Loudermilk, Fehoko. Who are the guys that you think will be the best complements as far as like the back guys behind the Haywards, Ogunjobis, Bentons, Leals, and such?
Well, back to rewind a couple minutes. They're not always. I mean, they're in a 4-man front more than they're in a 5-man front, 3-man front, 3-4. So, ideally, if Ogunjobi and Leal are your depth, because no fault of Ogunjobi, Benton's just better, and Leal takes a step up. Okay, you're cooking with gas now. I mean, that's great. I mean, in a 4-man front, if that's the second hockey line that you put out there, you're doing really well. I was very impressed, and I think a lot of listeners won't appreciate the efforts of Adams and Watt last year. Or Watts, I'm sorry, I called him Watt. Different. Get screwed up on this thing. A couple Watts floating around. And I think Adams coming back is huge. I mean, I think that he is a talented player. He was heavily recruited. He's more than just a stay-at-home hog nose tackle type. I'm hoping Lowry can match what Watts did, but we don't know. But he basically has been that same type of guy throughout his career. They're not the answers, but I call those two inning eaters. You know, they can come out there and their ERA is not great, but they get you through some tough stretches and long relievers, you know?
No, I think that's the big thing there is you need guys to stay fresh who won't be liabilities, because we've seen guys come in like a Cam Thomas who comes in and is a complete liability against the run and he gets bowled over. You can't have those type of guys. So as much as important it is to find the future and to find those first 4 interior defensive linemen, those last 2 as well are very important, because sometimes those are the downs that you get crushed on the run. And then, what was a 3rd and 6 that turns into a first down for the other team now is giving extra chances to an offense that you thought you had stopped in key moments of the game. So that's very important. Matt, I want to get your thoughts on the passing game. We'll do that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We got a lot of different things to cover before the first day in pads, which is today, by the way, at St. Vincent College. Both Matt and I will be there. But stay tuned. We got a lot to discuss there as well. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the app you can download right to your phone today to buy tickets to your favorite events without it being stressful. Game Time is where you can book your tickets to your favorite sporting events and so much more. And with it being summertime, that means it's baseball season. Get tickets to see your favorite ball club play at their next game with Game Time. Whether you're in Pittsburgh and you want to see rookie phenom Paul Skeens pitch on the mound, or you want to go, you're in Los Angeles and you want to see Shohei Ohtani be a world sensation for the Dodgers, Game Time is got you wherever that you go. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy your tickets on your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Plus, they have a best price guarantee that can't be beat. If you find tickets in the same section of row for less somewhere else, Game Time credits you 110% of the difference of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter here with Matt Williamson of Steeler Nation Radio and all the different affiliates that he works with. Of course, is also the Locked On Podcast Network. Matt, I wanted to talk about the passing game and at least how we think it will be constructed personnel-wise. We can get into the schematics another day with Arthur Smith, but just simply knowing who's going to be out there is going to be a thing. And we all know George Pickens is wide receiver 1 on this team, but I don't know about you. I feel like I've seen Roman Wilson show me something in the first 4 days of practice. And again, no pads, just the early days of training camp. We've seen Justin Hunter look spectacular without pads on. And then everyone's like, oh, wait, that's why he was picked up in free agency for so cheap. So not saying that Roman Wilson is the guy, but what have you seen from him, Calvin Austin, Van Jefferson, all the guys that are kind of vying for that wide receiver 2 spot?
Yeah. First of all, I mean, big picture passing game. I've kind of had a running joke that I actually think they're going to throw touchdown passes. Like, this team hasn't thrown touchdown passes in like 4 years. I mean, like,
you're right.
I mean, that's an important part of playing NFL football and winning in this league. I mean, Wilson threw 26 last year without playing the last 2 games of the season. You know, I mean, so he's going to throw the ball in the end zone, and I think they will actually score touchdowns through the air. That's a great start. We haven't yet seen Wilson, but I expect him to be better as a Steeler than he was a Bronco, and we could go deep into why he struggled there, and so a lot of it's on him. I'm not excusing it at all. Pickens, as everyone on the planet knows, is immensely talented. I still see him rounding off routes a little bit. I still see inconsistencies, and I think people need to realize, I mean, his last year at Georgia, he hardly played. His rookie year, he had an extremely limited route tree, led the league in go routes. Last year, he took a step forward in that regard, but now he needs to even get sharper with his routes. And people get mad at me on all my different outlets because I won't refer to him as a wide receiver 1. And frankly, I only think there's 12 or 15 of them on the planet. And one day he could be there, but he isn't now. He's too inconsistent, and the highs are high, the lows are low. But he obviously has the ability. That being said, I think the tight end room is going to contribute much more. I think Freiermuth will be the second leading receiver, and it looks like they're featuring him. And you mentioned him, moving him all over the formation.
Yes.
I expect a big year for Freiermuth. I mean, draft him in your fantasy leagues for where he's going. You'll be happy about it. And I think Washington looks better. The tight end room as a whole, to me, I'm very confident in. And there's going to be 2 of them on the field a lot. I'm with you on Wilson cautiously. Again, this mini camp, acclimation period, small, fast guys should look good. Calvin Austin should be looked like a superstar in these situations. It's a red flag if they don't, even if they're a rookie, more so than I'm ready to stand on the table for any of those guys. And they're obviously a fast group. I mean, the was it 5 of them that are all shooting, five dogs for 3 bones or something, to kind of quote Tomlin, and I don't think any have stood out. I think Van Jefferson is the most professional of the group. I think Austin and especially Wilson have the highest ceilings. Like if they hit, that's going to be highly worth it. The other guys to me kind of are what they are. And I know I'm not here to like stir the pot, but I still think they're working the phones like crazy for a number 2 receiver. I think the position as a whole is
Omar Khan denied it, but we all looked at each other like, man, please.
Come on. Right. They have so much cap space. They have so much flexibility. It would not surprise me if Tyler Lockett or better ended up in Pittsburgh in the next 2 weeks.
Not Brandon Ayuk.
There's some names we could talk about, but I mean, I think they'll land a brand name receiver.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And here's my other thought here, Matt. Let's say they don't get a brand name, but they get like another solid guy that's better than Van Jefferson, but maybe not Tyler Lockett. I'm struggling to come up with a name right now. Can this
like Robert Woods comes to mind,
or
you could get Slayton from the Giants on the cheap. That's better than the guys they have, but he's not a superstar,
Could this offense function without another like a brand name wide receiver? Because it's supposed to be able to run the ball, and they're gonna play off of that. Granted, we still don't even know who's the full starting offensive line yet. We got to see how this offense does look when they put the pads on in the first place. But with the way that Arthur Smith wants to run his offense, Pickens at 1 and Freiermuth as the tight end, who basically is kind of wide receiver 2, just at tight end. Can you get away with that, or do you think in today's NFL you need that other guy?
I have mixed feelings because what's the chances Pickens and Freiermuth play 17 plus games? I'm not even talking about their injury history. It's just that you can name anyone. Chances are they're going to get nicked up or not be the same at some point. I absolutely think, I know people get on Tomlin. He plays all these 1-score games. That's going to go back to the mean. He's phenomenal at it. And this team is really, really good in the fourth quarter. And they do that for a reason because he's a really good head coach. And I think this defense and running game can allow them to play that way, to squeak out tough games late in the game. And there's an art to that. And this team is very, very good at it. Not every team is. Deep down, though, I think the answer is no. I don't think they have enough firepower to be, I'm not saying beat the Chiefs, but be a contender.
Right.
Legit playoff team, not just the team that squeaks in and gets beat bad in round 1. I just don't think the firepower is there to compete in today's NFL.
I hear that. I want to get to your thoughts here too on the quarterbacks.
There's 1 or 2 guys. Maybe guys step up, but what I'm seeing at the end of July, I think you need another weapon.
Yeah, and again, it's early, but I'm looking at this too. I'm like, I feel like they need at least someone to step up if someone's not added to the roster.
Right.
To your point, but I want to also get your thoughts on the quarterback situation as well. It's kind of been beaten to death about the story about Russell Wilson. He's going to be back on Tuesday with the pads on. That's kind of. But what have you seen from Justin Fields so far? My opinion is I've looked at it. He looks very much like the quarterback that I expected coming from Chicago. When he throws a ball 40 yards down the field, it looks amazing. He can put that thing on a rope in between 2 defenders, and you're like, wow, how did he do that? But then he misses a 6-yard slant, and you're like, what is happening here? I think it's all about he needs to develop more consistency. And Tom Mar's big thing is I think it may need reworking mechanics or something that helps him be a more consistent thrower and processor with the ball in his hands.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. Of course, we all watched him at Chicago and Ohio State and all those things. And I love the pickup. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But there's definitely something. What they paid for him is nothing. Yeah, but there's something to be said for watching these guys live as well. As just as a scout, you want to see a quarterback throw live. I think he's a bit of a pusher. I don't think he's super snappy, and I'm not sure if everyone knows what that means.
Describe pusher, just so that the audience.
Well, his release point's a little low, and we've seen some balls getting batted down already. Mm-hmm. I think he has to get a little bit more behind it. When I say he's not snappy, like remember Michael Vick when he was here, it was like a dart coming out, or Mahomes. Right. I mean, that's really Rodgers. I mean, those guys get rid of the ball now without any wasted motion, and it's snappy. It comes out quick. I don't see that. I don't see a twitchy thrower, but I see a power thrower, and he does throw a nice deep ball. His mechanics seem somewhat inconsistent. I mean, as a player, not a thrower, they're asking him to play without his best asset, which is his running ability, of course. Right. And like in 7 shots the other day, he beat Highsmith to the cone with no problem whatsoever. And the 2 or 3 times I've seen him open it up, it's like, wow. You know, I mean,
it's a different level.
He's a specimen. But I forget who I was talking to at one of the watering holes one of the nights, and they were saying they were putting a reel together of his longest completion in a row streak, you know, like his, and it's very low, you know, like it's rare for him to complete 5 balls in a row, you know, to your point. Wow. Like there's one that is what happened there, you know what I mean? And that needs to change. And I have no inclination that it will. I'm not saying it won't, but we've seen that for a while now. And lastly, and this is being very critical, but I would hope the Steeler coaching staff is in his ear like crazy about it. 7-on-7, no pass rush. You can't be patting the ball for 3 seconds. I mean, that's his biggest problem in the league thus far is it doesn't come up quick enough. The processing isn't quick enough. And he takes a lot of pressures and sacks or bad plays because of it. So they need to be in his ear like crazy. Yeah, I know there's no pass rush and you can sit there and wait for plays to develop, but that's not real.
No, I agree entirely. And again, neither of us are saying that Justin Fields is doomed to be like this for all eternity. No, but we're acknowledging where he is right now and where he has to get to if he wants to become the starting quarterback of this team in the future. Matt,
and if he wasn't, the Bears would have got a 2nd-round pick for him, you know, or a future. I mean, if these weren't issues, they would have got more for him, you know.
Right? He would have been a much heftier price, and maybe he's not with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now.
Right.
Absolutely. Matt, thank you so much for all your insights. It's always great to have you on the show. Let me know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, I'm at Williamson NFL. I started a YouTube page recently. Go check that out. I'm also on Twitter, of course, at Williamson NFL. Peacock and Williamson is our main Locked On show. And, you know, some of your listeners might not know this, but I was the first host in NFL Locked On history. I was the one and only there for a while when we were just decided when David Locke decided to start going to the NFL. I was the first choice, which was great.
Literally the OG of Locked On NFL podcast. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. He's Matt Williamson. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here at the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. We're back tomorrow giving you a recap of what happened first day of pads at Pittsburgh Steelers training camp here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.